Write-in section, questions 1 through 11. For the write-in section, it does pay to read through the passages, but you don't really have to have a deep understanding like you do in the reading section. For this review, I'm just going to go through the questions. Question 1. Let's start from near the beginning of the sentence. Tens of thousands of black former slaves left the southern United States for finding social and economic opportunity. So the first thing I like to do is correct it on my own. If I were to correct the original, I would say to find, and that would work. Choice B, they left the US in search of economic opportunity. That's good. Choice C, they left the US with a look for. That's not idiomatic. You could say they left the US to look for. Or you could say they left the US with a participle looking for. So you can use the infinitive or the participle after the verb left. Choice D, they left the US to the discovery of. Again, similar to choice C, you can correct it by saying to discover, but you wouldn't say to the discovery of. So that leaves choice B, and that's the answer. Question 2. Start reading right over here. The movement was known as the Great Exodus, and their participants came to be known as exodusters. So the question is, what is there referring to? It's referring to movement. And what's the problem? Movement is singular, there is plural. So you want a singular possessive pronoun, and the best choice for movement, since it's like a concept or an object, is its. B and C are both singular, his, her, one's, but they're typically used for people. So the best choice is C, and the problem was agreement, pronoun antecedent agreement specifically. Number 3, which choice provides the most appropriate context for the discussion that follows in the passage? So this type of question you probably want to leave until the end after you've read the whole thing, and then you can come back to it. Let's read what it says. During this time, travel from one part of the country to another took days or even weeks, and the dangers wild animals posed were not to be underestimated. So the rest of this passage talks about how a lot of the black former slaves went to Kansas, and specifically that town in Nicodemus, and then it kind of uses that to make more general statements about their future and what their choices were and what happened. So we're not really talking about how long travel took or whether there are wild animals. So A is completely unrelated. Choice B, settlers from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Missouri were part of the Great Exodus. I mean, that might be true, but again, it doesn't really set up the focus, which is going to be that one town in Kansas and why everyone went there. Choice C. The Great Exodus has parallels to large-scale migrations that occurred in the United States during the 20th century. Choice C would only work if we were going to talk about large-scale migrations, but nothing like that in the next 2 paragraphs or 3. D. Drawn by the promise of farming on their own land rather than sharecropping for a landlord, exodusters founded dozens of communities in the West in the 1870s. So this seems like it'll work because by saying they founded dozens of communities, that's the general background or the context, and they're giving Kansas and Nicodemus as one example of that. So choice D is the best one. Number 4, at this point the writer is considering adding the following sentence. Between 1870 and 1879, approximately 10,000 exodusters entered Kansas. So let's consider where this is in the paragraph. We already have been talking about Nicodemus. It says one settlement in the state was Nicodemus, a town in northwestern Kansas that drew more than 300 settlers. So in general, I'm going to say that this seems kind of inappropriate because we're already talking about a specific town. Why go back and make generalizations about the entire state of Kansas? But let's read through them just in case. Choice A. Yes, because it sheds light on an aspect of the settlers' backgrounds. So again, nothing in this sentence about the settlers' backgrounds, so we're going to cross that off. Choice B, yes, because it provides a historical context for the discussion of the Great Exodus. This sentence itself would be considered part of the Great Exodus, definitely not providing any historical context. In other words, background about the Great Exodus. So even if you thought it should go in there, neither of the 2 choices that say yes make a lot of sense. Choice C, no, because it contradicts information in the previous paragraph. Again, nothing in the previous paragraph that said anything opposite to this, so choice C is out. D, No, because it digresses from the discussion of the settlement of Nicodemus. So digression is an okay term to use. I think what's going on is we're starting off broad. We're talking about what's going on after slavery. And then we're zooming into this small town in Nicodemus. And then if you were to stick this sentence in, it would be kind of like zooming back out to the great state of Kansas, or the greater area. And I don't think that's appropriate. Once we're talking about Nicodemus as a town, we should stick with that topic. So D is the best answer. Question 5. Which choice most effectively sets up the information that follows in the paragraph? Real estate agents mention Nicodemus in brochures and newspapers, but the reality that exodusters confronted on arrival was less appealing. And then they mention things like the flat, empty landscape, contrasted with forested hills where they grew up, and people generally not liking where they are. So the original, the fact that they mentioned Nicodemus in brochures and newspapers, that seems okay, but let's see if we can find a better choice. Choice B, real estate agents wrote songs and slogans to attract settlers. I don't know if they really did that. This one seems just okay. Choice C, advertise the location and characteristics of Nicodemus. This one kind of seems similar. Choice D, promise plentiful harvest and abundant wildlife. So what you'll notice is that choice D is kind of different from B and C because it's a lot more positive. And if you look at the sentence, real estate agents, if you say something positive here, that establishes the contrast with the reality, meaning to say that it was less appealing, flat, empty landscape, and people bursting into tears. So out of all the choices, D is the most positive and sets up that contrast that they're trying to build. Number 6, this is diction, meaning we have to choose the right word. Some exodusters return to the familiar expanse of their home. So this is a preposition phrase right here. The expanse is obviously referring to the home in some way. So can you say an expanse of your home? Expanse has a connotation of distance. You can say things like expanse of ocean. Here we're not really looking for that. We're looking for something familiar. So we'll cross out A. Choice B, some return to the familiar terrain of their home. Terrain can mean geographical area, and it does have this connotation of something that you know, because it could also refer to a field of knowledge. So terrain seems to work for now. Choice C, they return to the familiar spread of their home. So this one is probably the most wrong. You can say things like a spread of newspaper, spread of cheese, or it could mean some sort of a gap, but you wouldn't really say a spread of your home. Choice D, locale. They return to the familiar locale of their home. Locale does have to do with physical location, but it has more of a connotation of a place for an event, like a locale for a birthday or a wedding or something like that. So the best choice is B, and that's the answer. Number 7, let's read the sentence. Some exodusters returned to the familiar expanse of their home states, but others, including Hickman and her husband Daniel, decided to stay in their new farming villages. So the major error here is that you have this modifying phrase, including Hickman and her husband Daniel, and it's separated by two different things, a dash here and a comma here. You know that it's a modifying phrase because otherwise the sentence does read smoothly, but others decided to stay in their new farming villages. So really, we just need to be consistent, comma or a dash. In this case, they're not giving us the option, so we have to go with the comma. So all the answer choices should have a comma after the word others, and the only one that does that is choice D. Notice that choice D also solves this problem of the inappropriate use of a colon, in which case you would only use a colon if you're introducing a list or a new sentence that explains or clarifies the previous sentence. So D is the best choice. Question 8, let's read the sentence. Possessing less wealth than settlers from Europe or other parts of the US, horses or farm implements could not be afforded by many exodusters who had to do agricultural work with inadequate hand tools. So what you want to notice is that you're starting the sentence with a modifier, and the rule is that the subject of the sentence needs to be the thing that's modified. So obviously, horses or farm implements are not the people who are possessing less wealth. So if you look through the answers, you need to pick one in which the subject is the people actually possessing less wealth. Choice B, the subject is affording, so that's not going to work. That's a gerund. Choice C, many exodusters. That could definitely work. Choice D, the subject here is the lack. So that's definitely not going to work either. So C is the answer. Number 9. The prosperity of exoduster settlements depended on the yields of their farms. Eventually, harvests in Nicodemus grew, which allowed residents to purchase lumber for their houses and attracted banks, blah, blah, blah. So right now, this use of the word eventually is okay. The first sentence talks about this general principle that their prosperity depended on how much their farm yielded. And then it says eventually the harvest grew, which is obviously the same thing as the yield. So we'll keep A for now. Look at choice B. Still, the harvest in Nicodemus grew. Still would signify some type of contrast, but there's no indication from the first sentence that anything would prevent the harvest from growing, so B is not going to work. Rather is the same thing. It would signify a contrast, which is not there. In choice D, next. Next is a little bit awkward because it would imply that we're talking about some type of process that has a certain number of steps, but clearly the first sentence is not talking about step 1, and then the second sentence is not talking about step 2. So the best answer is choice A. Number 10. So let's start from that sentence again. Eventually, harvests in Nicodemus grew, which allowed residents to purchase lumber for their houses and attracted banks, grocery stores, and other businesses. So here we have a list with 3 items: banks, grocery stores, and other businesses. So far, this looks okay. Notice that they are using what's called an Oxford comma. It's a comma that separates the last item in a business, which grammatically is not wrong. So let's look through the answer choices. We'll keep A for now. B, banks, grocery stores. So here they are incorrectly separating grocery stores. Grocery stores are not 2 separate items. Grocery is actually describing the type of stores they are, and even though it is a noun, that's called an appositive. Grocery stores, wedding channel, that type of thing. Choice C. Notice choice C and D, what they're doing is they're introducing a semicolon to separate these items. While you can use a semicolon to separate longer items in a list, in this case, because the items are so short, it probably wouldn't be the best choice. Choice C inconsistently uses a semicolon and a comma, which makes it wrong. So choice A is the best answer. Question 11, let's read the sentence. But the challenge of small-scale farming, exacerbated and made worse by economic volatility, slowed the great exodus. So the error here is that exacerbated actually means made worse. So this is redundant. In other words, you're saying the same thing twice. So A is going to be wrong. Choice B, exacerbated and worsened, exact same error. Choice C seems to be correct. Choice D, made worse by exacerbation. Again, these are the exact same things, so it's not like exacerbation causes things to be made worse. Exacerbation is the process of making something worse. So choice D is also out, and C is the answer. Question 12. Let's read the whole paragraph. Julian Hume, a paleontologist at the Natural History Museum in the UK, has long been troubled by the misunderstanding surrounding the scientific community's knowledge of the dodo, a large flightless bird. This was a bird that was endemic to the Indian Ocean island of Mauritius, I don't know how to pronounce that, and likely went extinct by the year 1693. So notice what's going on. They want us to combine the sentences, and the main part of the sentence is that this guy, Julian, has been troubled by the misunderstanding surrounding the dodo, and then what they're doing is they're giving us some incidental information about it. It's a large flightless bird, endemic to the Indian Ocean, went extinct by the year 1693. So let's look at how they want us to combine this. Choice A, and keep in mind what you're connecting it to. You're connecting it to knowledge of the dodo, a large flightless bird that was endemic to the Indian Ocean island of Mauritius and went extinct. What's nice about A, and we'll keep it for now, is that it turns this whole section, starting from a large flightless bird, into a modifier that modifies dodo. And by doing that, you make it clear that this first part of the sentence is actually the more important information, and the rest of this is less important. So for now, we'll keep choice A. Choice B, a large flightless bird, comma, a bird that was endemic to the Indian Ocean. So the reason B is not going to work is because you're repeating bird for no reason. You could actually just cross off this, and then it would be much better. So we'll cross off B. Choice C. A large flightless bird, which was endemic to the Indian Ocean island of Mauritius. And notice what's going on here. Everything is good up until the semicolon. By putting a semicolon, it forces you to follow up with a complete sentence, which makes this sentence sound like it's much more important than it actually is, because all you're really doing is saying when it went extinct. So C is not really going to work. Choice D. A large flightless bird endemic to the Indian Ocean island of Mauritius. Good up until here. And then it says one that on this island went extinct. So if this doesn't sound awkward to you, just keep in mind we're kind of repeating the subject of bird in this case, and usually it's not a good idea to do that. It creates very awkward and wordy sentences. So we'll cross out choice D and stick with choice A. Question 13. So we just read the first paragraph and we said the main idea is that the paleontologist is troubled by the misunderstanding of the knowledge of the dodo. And now let's read the sentence. Consequently, the dodo has been depicted as an unintelligent, oddly shaped animal with tiny wings and a clumsy demeanor. So consequently implies that this is the effect of something before. So the fact that the paleontologist is troubled by misunderstandings of the dodo, does that naturally lead to the dodo being depicted as an unintelligent, oddly shaped animal? And of course the answer is no. So consequently is not the right answer. Also notice that choice C is going to be wrong. So looking at choice B, traditionally the dodo has been depicted as blah, blah, blah. Traditionally implies that we're getting some type of background knowledge, something that had been going on for a while, which may actually have led to him being troubled or may have been a misunderstanding. So we'll keep choice B for now. Choice D. If you say similarly, the dodo has been depicted as unintelligent, there would have to be something in the first paragraph that would also say something similar to that, that people thought that the dodo was unintelligent, but we don't really see anything in there. So choice D is also going to be out, and the answer is B. Question 14. The writer is considering revising the underlined portion to the following. So let's read the original. However, human others have shown that the dodo was much more capable than such depictions would suggest, and they want to add in, however, using cutting-edge techniques to analyze skeletal specimens, human others, blah, blah, blah. So this actually works really well because if you read the next two paragraphs, they do talk about using 3D imaging and CT scans. So generally it seems okay. Let's read through the answer choices. A, yes, because it introduces information that is developed later in the passage, seems reasonable. B, yes, because it gives details that reinforce the description in the previous sentence. So nothing in this previous section that talks about cutting edge techniques. That means like the most modern or the best techniques. So choice B is out. C, no, because it adds an idea that is not directly related to the passage's main discussion. So again, as you read the next two passages, the next two paragraphs, you will see that it is related to how they did things. Choice D, no, because it contradicts information provided in the concluding paragraph. So obviously this is a question we should be leaving out until the very end. And if you read the concluding paragraph, it does say they were able to get better information because of better techniques, which is what they're talking about here. So we'll cross out choice D, and A is the answer. Question 15. So notice all the answer choices are about what type of punctuation to put after the word pelvis. Let's read the sentence. Hume noted that the robust kneecaps of R. cucullatus, along with its thick leg bones and broad pelvis, would have provided them with the strength and maneuverability, blah, blah, blah. So the reason they're concerned about this is because notice that this phrase, along with its thick leg bones and broad pelvis, is actually a modifier. The real subject of this verb would have is the robust kneecaps. When you say along with its thick leg bones and broad pelvis, that's just adding extra information. And since we're starting it off with a comma, you generally want to close it off with the same thing. And so that's why the choice is D, and it leaves no other option that would be correct. Question 16. So again, going over the sentence again, Hume noted that the robust kneecaps of R. cucullatus, along with its, in this case, I'm really just going to ignore this because it's not relevant. The robust kneecaps of R. cucullatus would have provided them with the strength and maneuverability to blah, blah, blah. So the question is, who or what is them referring to? And it's referring to R. cucullatus. So that's singular, them is plural. That's why A is wrong. And so the best answer is choice B. Notice also that if you weren't sure, this modifier uses the word its, which is also referring to our calculator. So that could have been another clue that we needed the pronoun it here as well. Question 17. The writer wants to add the following sentence to the paragraph. The team also argued for the anatomical significance of the ridges and indentations in the dodo wings bones. And to make this paragraph more logical, where should we put the sentence? So very quickly, just look at how the paragraph is working. Sentence 2 is introducing the idea that they used images to reconstruct the skeletal structure. Sentence 3 is talking about specifics that they found: robust kneecaps, thick leg bones, broad pelvis. Sentence 4 is kind of the conclusion from all that. The prominence of those features suggests a well-developed musculature that enhance the dodo's speed and agility. So this is basically extra information about the bones. So it's going to have to go somewhere around sentence 3. So if you're debating between putting it after sentence 2 or 3, keep in mind there is the word also here, which would suggest it's better after the other information. And there is the connection to the dodo's wing bones, which is developed further right here in sentence 4. So C is the best choice. Question 18, let's read the sentence. Another team of scientists, being the team that was overseen and led by comparative biologist Eugenia Gold, then a graduate student working at the American Museum of Natural History, focused on the dodo's capacity for cognition. So to make the sentence easier, I'm just going to cross out this whole modifying phrase. Keep in mind this is the main verb. So immediately when you read this, you should know that if you say another team of scientists being a team, you're repeating the word team, which stylistically is just never really good. So A is not likely going to be the answer. Let's look at what the other choices are. Another team of scientists led by comparative biologist Eugenia Gold, focused on the dodo's capacity for cognition. That is a perfect sentence. Sounds okay. Choice C, another team of scientists, comma, a team led. Again, same error with repeating the word team, so we'll cross it out. Choice D, another team of scientists, overseen and also led by comparative biologists. So this is actually repeating another error in the original. To say that it was overseen and led is probably redundant, because if she led the team, she most likely oversaw it. So choice D is out, and we're left with choice B. Question 19, let's read it. The sentence says, the team created similar models for 8 of the dodo's presumed closest relatives, including several extant species. They calculated the ratio of brain volume to total body mass for each specimen. So immediately you should see that the problem here is a comma splice. What that means is you're connecting 2 independent clauses or 2 independent sentences with a comma, and grammatically you just can't do that. You can either separate them with a period, or you can connect them with some type of conjunction. So let's see what options they give us. A is wrong. Choice B. Notice what choice B does. If you read the sentence and start the second one by saying, also they calculated the ratio of brain volume, that's still 2 independent clauses joined by a comma, so same mistake. Choice C, the team created blah, 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 and they calculated blah, blah, blah. That actually works, so we'll keep that. Choice D, notice what happens if you delete the word they. The core of your sentence becomes the team created blah, 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 calculated blah, blah, blah. And so automatically you know you need a conjunction to join those 2 clauses, and would probably be the best one. So choice D is also out, and C is the answer. Question 20. The writer wants to acknowledge a potential objection to the means by which Gold and her team reached their conclusion. Which choice most effectively accomplishes that goal? So let's read what they did. They calculated the ratio of the brain volume to the total body mass, and the ratio was similar to a modern bird that was also pretty smart, and so they conclude that the dodo was not at all dim-witted. So what's an objection you can make to this? You can probably make a couple. Number one, the main one being, is brain volume necessarily comparable to intelligence? And number 2, how closely are these birds similar to each other? So keeping that in mind, look what they do. While brain volume is not an infallible indicator of intelligence, yeah, that takes care of the first objection, that brain volume may not actually indicate intelligence. So we'll keep A for now. Let's look at what their other choices are. Choice B, comparing dodos to Neanderthals, another underestimated extinct species. So by bringing in Neanderthals, it really doesn't actually help the argument very much. So we'll cross out choice B. Choice C. Despite the fact that the dodo is extinct, yeah, you could say that because the dodo is extinct that these conclusions are not valid, but really the main objection here is with the brain volume, and that's why choice C and also choice B would be out. D, since the dodo's brain volume was correlated to its body size. So again, the objection is not the fact that a mismatch between brain volume and correlation size would mean that the dodo is stupid. The argumentative strategy here is that because it has the same ratio as the modern bird, therefore we should consider that it might be intelligent. So all that said, choice A is the best answer. Question 21. Human goals results obtained with more comprehensive data than previously available and with the aid of improved analytical techniques offer a necessary revision of the dodo's reputation. So let's focus on what's going on here. Hume and Gold are actually two separate people, so they're both going to need an apostrophe S. If they were one, or if this were a title, then you can get away with just using one. So that's one issue here. The other issue is that results has an apostrophe with no reason. You use an apostrophe to show that something belongs to something else. So Hume and Gold both possess the results, but the results don't possess anything else. So that tells you we can immediately cross off choice C for an apostrophe there. And then if you're debating between choice B and D, remember that Hume is the name. So if the original name is Hume, you just add an apostrophe S. And so that's why choice D is correct. Choice B would work if Humes were a group of people, and to show possession by a group of people, you actually put the apostrophe after the S, but that's clearly not what the case is here. So we'll stick with choice D. Question 22, let's read the sentence. The dodo may not have been the most graceful of birds or an avian Einstein, but neither was it the clownish creature that is so often imagined. So notice that the answer is this is a question about tense. Is this the proper tense, past tense? Sure, because if you think about the second part of the sentence by itself, you would say the dodo was not the clownish creature that is so often imagined, and that's appropriate. So we'll keep choice A for now. Notice all the other choices are not past tense. This is future, this is present progressive, and this is future perfect. All of them really are kind of inappropriate to describe the characteristics of the dodo bird that were in the past. So we'll stick with A, and that's the answer. Question 23, let's read the sentence. Considering her options after graduation, college student Shantia Dyson thought about what she might do and decided that she wanted to use her skills to help her people struggling with the challenges of poverty. So grammatically, this is actually okay. Whether or not it's necessary to say that she thought about what she might do and then decided, I think is open for discussion. So maybe not great stylistically, but we'll keep it for now. Choice B. Mulled over her future plans and decided. So choice B is actually very similar to choice A, which would suggest that both of them can't be right, so they probably don't want to keep that idea. Choice C, she made a choice, deciding. This is clearly redundant because deciding is the same as making a choice. And so that leaves us with choice D. Shantia Dyson decided that she wanted to use her skills to help her people, and that seems to be what they're going for, which is the most concise choice. Question 24. The easiest way to do this is to simplify the sentence. So let's do that. In 2016, Dyson began her visa service. I'm going to cross this out, this preposition phrase. In Savannah, Georgia, where, I'm also going to cross out this modifying phrase, in exchange for a modest salary. So let's read the simplified version. Dyson began her visa service in Savannah, Georgia, where she supports the organization. And just ignore the rest. So right now, this looks okay. If you were initially confused by this second comma over here, keep in mind this comma was to set off this modifying phrase, and they properly closed it with this comma. So choice A does work. Notice that choice B and D introduce semicolons. So would a semicolon be appropriate here? Dyson began her visa service in Savannah, Georgia. The reason it wouldn't work is because where turns the rest of the sentence into a relative clause, and anytime you have a semicolon, you need to have two complete sentences on both sides. So that's why that doesn't work. And then choice C, where there's absolutely no justification to put a colon right there, and so that's why the answer is A. Question 25, let's read the sentence. Dyson and their fellow Vista members or Vistas have made an excellent decision, one that will benefit them now and in the future. So clearly the error here is there is referring to Dyson, but Dyson is singular. So the best choice for that is choice C, her. Its is usually used for inanimate objects, and one's is used in cases where you don't really know who the person is, such as if I were to ask, or if I were to say, one's opinion doesn't matter in this situation. It's because I'm not talking about anyone specifically, but here we definitely know who Dyson is, and so choice C is the answer. Question 26. So let's read the sentence. The program's dedication to assisting people in need makes the work especially reassuring to those who, like Dyson, find joy in serving and helping others. So reassuring is describing the work, and this is a diction question, meaning what is the best word to get across the right idea. Reassuring means more like removing doubt. So it doesn't really make sense to say that the work removes doubts. There's no indication of that. So A is probably not the best choice. Looking at choice B, thankful. Work itself cannot be thankful. Only a person can be thankful. So that doesn't make any sense. C, you might think satisfactory works. Satisfactory actually means that something is adequate or enough. So for example, evidence can be satisfactory to prove something. The only way that work can be satisfactory would be from, say, like a boss's perspective, that the work was satisfactory in terms of getting the job done. A better choice here, which would work, would be satisfying, and that would be okay. Choice D, gratifying, and that's actually closest to satisfying, so that is the answer. Question 27. Let's read the sentence. However, Vista's responsibilities tend to be at a higher level than those found in private sector jobs. So the question here is this generally seen as a positive or a negative thing? If you keep reading the passage, the fact that they have higher responsibilities is actually seen as positive because they can use their talents on big picture initiatives and so forth. So given that the first couple of sentences also speaks about positive things about Vista, however, it doesn't make sense because however you would use for contrast. So A is going to be out. To that end basically means, with that goal or for that reason. It's not really clear that this idea, the responsibilities being higher, is to the goal of making it satisfying. So B doesn't really make sense. What's more does seem to work because you use that expression to introduce further information and generally continue with the positive things about this organization. So we'll keep it for now. D, nevertheless, that's kind of like however, and we said you don't need a contrasting word there because it's positive, so we'll cross out that. Question 28, let's read the sentence. Vistas are typically not hired to offer direct services such as delivering food. Rather, they use their talents on big picture initiatives such as building the capacity and improving blah, blah, blah. All right, so what's going on here? You've got two sentences, two independent clauses connected by a comma. That's a comma splice. A and B keep the comma splice. C changes it into a semicolon, which actually can join two sentences that are very closely related. So C is going to be the answer. If you look at D, what's going on is a little bit interesting. It says Vistas are typically not hired to offer direct services such as delivering food rather. So what they're doing is that they're attaching the rather to the previous sentence as opposed to the following one. And then the colon, you could use it to say that the next part is going to explain the previous part, but clearly the better use of rather is keeping it connected to the second sentence because it is a direct contrast with the first one. So of all the choices, C is the best answer, and we'll go with that. Question 29, let's read the sentence. Dyson enthusiastically explains that her role at the farmers market involves enhancing the organization's reach and visibility, as well as increasing and diversifying financial and in-kind resources. So let's look at what's going on right now with this colon. What the colon does is it sets off this part of the sentence from the rest, and it says, Dyson enthusiastically explains that, making it sound like the that is referring to something back in the sentence. Just from reading the whole sentence, however, you can kind of figure out that the role of the word that is to merely introduce the content of what she's explaining. Dyson explains that her role at the farmer's market involves blah, blah, blah. So if we're using the word that to paraphrase someone else's speech, you actually don't need any punctuation right here. So choice A is out and choice C is also out. Looking at choice B, it says, Dyson explains that her role at the farmer's market involves. A colon would be appropriate if you were introducing a list of things, but clearly there's no list here. So B is out. It's also unnecessary. So that leaves choice D. Dyson explains that her role at the farmer's market involves A and B, and that's the right answer. Question 30. Which choice provides the most effective introduction to the paragraph? Let's read the first sentence. The program also assists Vistas in preparing for their future careers. So that sounds okay, because notice the next sentence. It says they're rating the program's success in helping them build various career-specific skills, and then they list these general skills. Notice nowhere in the paragraph do they get specific and say that they actually had to determine what they want to do for a living, so that's out. It also doesn't say that they are committed or that they should stay in public service, so that choice is also out. Choice B, learning to meet deadlines. Yeah, it definitely mentions that right here, but that's not general enough to introduce the paragraph, so choice A is still the best. Question 31. Which choice most effectively uses information from the graph to support the writer's argument for the Vista service? So let's read the original. It says 30% of alumni rated Vista service as having improved their management of self and work somewhat. So the first graph talks about improving the managing of self and work, and it is true that 30% reported it helped somewhat, but if you're arguing for the Vista program, you might as well focus on the 66% that it said it helped a great deal, not the 30% who said it helped somewhat. So A is not going to be a great choice. B, 66% of alumni rated Vista service as having improved their management of self and work a great deal. Very true, and we're focusing on the most important part, so we'll keep B for now. Choice C, more Vista alumni reported that the program had improved their management of self and work than reported it had not done so. So that is true. If you count a great deal and somewhat together, that's about 96%. But just by saying more, you're implying that it's probably not much higher than 50%. So this actually doesn't do a good service to the data, and it's not as effective as choice B in arguing for the Vista service. So we'll cross it out. Choice D. Of the Vista alumni who responded to the survey, some thought that the program had improved their management of self and work. So again, using the word some, it really sounds like this is a smaller minority, not as much as 66% and not as much as 96% if we're counting both groups together. So either way, it doesn't really help, and choice B is the best. Question 32. Which choice most effectively uses information from the graph to support the main idea of the paragraph? So let's read the original. Additionally, most Vista alumni surveyed, about 3/4 agreed or strongly agreed with the claim that Vista was a worthwhile experience in furthering their professional goals. So professional goals is this graph down here, and it says 3/4 agreed or strongly agreed. That's about right, because if you add up 28 and 48, it's about 76%. So this seems accurate, and we'll keep it for now. Choice B. Many Vista alumni surveyed, about half agreed with that statement. So if you're grouping strongly agree and agree together, it's definitely more than half. We said it's about 76%. And even if you're just counting the people who agreed, which is 28%, you're still kind of ignoring the people who strongly agreed, which doesn't really help your case either. So we'll cross out B. Choice C. Only about 1/4 of Vista alumni surveyed disagreed with that statement. That is true. 24% disagreed. But again, if you're focusing on the 24%, we're not really sure what the other 76% said, so it's not as strong as the original statement in making a positive case for the program. Choice D. Virtually all Vista alumni surveyed either agreed with or were neutral regarding whether it helped. Again, that's not true, because in this 24%, we don't know how many actually were neutral or disagreed. And even if you were to argue that the 24% were all neutral, just by saying 100% of the students either agreed in some fashion or were neutral doesn't really tell you what proportion of each answered in a certain way. So it also doesn't help the case to support this program. So D is out, and we're left with A as the best choice. Question 33, let's read the sentence. By joining Vista, Shantia Dyson is following in the footsteps of hundreds of thousands of people over the program's 50-year history who are helping improve both their communities and their career prospects. So immediately you know that the tense is wrong, because this is present progressive, which means that it's going on right now. But what they're really saying is that it started in the past and it's continuing to go on right now over 50-year history. So the correct tense that gets that across is present perfect, which is choice B. So we're going to keep that and cross out A. Let's look at the rest of them. Choice C, will have helped. That's future perfect. We're not talking about the future just yet, so we'll cross it out. Choice D, would have helped. This implies that they would have helped if given a certain opportunity, but in reality they didn't help. So that's also not what she's trying to say. And choice B is the best answer. Question 34, let's read the sentence. Elgin arrived with a permit from officials from the Ottoman Empire, which then occupied Greece, granted him permission to make drawings and casts of the sculptures. So right away what you'll notice is that we have a period here, which means new sentence starts here, but this new sentence is ended by a semicolon here. And if you use a semicolon, both sides of the semicolon have to have an independent clause or a complete sentence. Granted him permission to make drawings and casts of the sculptures is not a complete sentence, so we can cross it out. So let's see how they plan to fix this. Just go through the choices. Choice B, they're putting a comma after Greece, so let's do that and read it. Elgin arrived with a permit from officials of the Ottoman Empire, which then occupied Greece. So notice what this comma does. It turns this into a relative clause, which is all describing Ottoman Empire. And then the sentence reads smoothly without it. Elgin arrived with a permit from officials of the Ottoman Empire, granting him permission to make drawings. And this whole thing is describing the permit. So B does work. Choice C, they're putting a comma in front of Greece, and they're starting a new sentence by saying it granted. So notice that that creates a comma splice. In other words, you have two separate sentences, two independent clauses, stuck together by a comma without a conjunction. So choice C is going to be out. Choice D, notice they're adding the word and before granting. So let's read it. It says, Elgin arrived with a permit from officials of the Ottoman Empire, which then occupied Greece, and granting him permission to make drawings. So right now, this modifier is misplaced because it sounds like both the occupying of Greece is the Ottoman Empire and the granting him permission to make drawings is the Ottoman Empire, but this granting is actually referring to the permit. So it's a misplaced modifier. If you want to fix this, you could say, and the permit granted him permission to make drawings of the sculptures. So that would be one way to make D better, but nonetheless, B is the right answer. Question 35, the writer is considering revising the underlined portion to the following. Let's read it first. It says, starting here, some public figures, including the poet Lord Byron and politician Sir John Newport, immediately questioned the legitimacy of Elgin's seemingly good intentions, meaning to say to take the sculptures. What's their addition? To them, it seemed like Elgin was stealing rather than protecting an important part of Greek culture. So I'm okay with adding that because it does explain why they thought his intentions were not really good. So let's look through the answer choices. A, yes, because it clarifies the opinions of the public figures in a way that helps establish the focus of the passage. A seems to work because the focus of the passage was the sculptures and the controversy surrounding them. B, yes, because it suggests that Greek culture was able to thrive within the Ottoman Empire. Again, this addition right here doesn't really say anything about Greek culture in the Ottoman Empire. It is really just focused on Elgin and his intentions, so not likely. C, no, because it disrupts the passage's narrative about the Parthenon sculptures by giving loosely related information. I wouldn't say that this is loosely related. I do think it's directly related to what his intentions are, so we're not going to go with C. D, no, because it merely records uncredited hearsay about the actions of Elgin. So definitely not uncredited hearsay because it's credited to Lord Byron and Sir John Newport. So D is out and we're left with A. 36, which choice provides the most effective transition between the discussion of the committee's investigation and the next event in the narrative? So let's read it. Following an investigation, a British parliamentary committee concluded that Britain should give asylum to the sculptors. In 1823, Lord Byron sailed to Greece to support the Greek quest for independence from the Ottoman Empire. So there does seem to be a disconnect between the granting of protection to the sculptures and the fact that there was independence from the Ottoman Empire on the part of Greece. But let's look through the answer choices. Choice B, the concept of asylum typically applies to situations involving political refugees. That is true, but not really helpful in this situation and not really related. Choice C, they were installed in the British Museum that same year. So this does give additional information after the parliamentary committee ruled that they should give asylum to the sculptures. This was the result, so that's okay. Choice D, They no longer had the vivid colors applied by ancient Greek artisans, totally unrelated to anything going on in the passage. So while I'm not convinced that choice C effectively transitions to the following sentence and everything after, it is a good addition to what we have already, and so that's why that's the answer. Question 37, let's read the sentence. After Greece gained independence in 1832, however, some argued that the agreement Elgin had made with the Ottoman Empire was now totally bogus and the sculptures should be returned. So immediately you should read now totally bogus and think to yourself, this is a little bit too informal to be used in an essay. So let's look at what the answers say. Probably not A. B, no longer valid. That works and it definitely fits the overall style and tone of the essay better. C, not okay anymore. Again, same problem with the original choice, just too informal. D, henceforth bereft of legitimacy. This is just too wordy and too highbrow sounding. It's not as simple as B, no longer valid, and doesn't really fit the style of the rest of the essay. So that one's out also. The answer is B. Question 38, let's read it. It says, in 1925, a series of newspaper debates brought the issue to popular attention, and Greece has raised the question of the sculpture's repatriation with almost every British ambassador ever since. So the expression here, raise the question, this is actually not the right use of raise. Most likely we just mean raise in the general sense, to raise a question. Raze, R-A-Z-E, means to destroy, so you can raise a building to the ground, that type of thing. So A is obviously out. B, appraise the question. Appraise means to set the value or estimate the value of something. So if you have like an old instrument and you want to know how much it's worth, you would get it appraised. Upraise literally can mean to raise up. So someone's arms can be upraised, but you wouldn't use it and say a question was upraised. It just doesn't have that semantic range. And finally, the last choice, raised, is what we were thinking. Raised has a wide enough semantic range to say that you can raise a question, you can raise your hands. It's, typically the most general words or the simplest words have the widest range of meanings. And of the choices, it's the only one that's appropriate to raise a question. So D is the answer. Question 39, let's read the sentence. Officials from the British Museum have long argued that the expertise of their curators has protected the sculptures from the elements. So whenever you're considering what verb is appropriate, you want to consider the tense, person, and number. So you have to look at the subject to see which one. The subject is expertise of their curators, and it's really the word expertise because it's the expertise that's protected the sculptures, not the curators. Grammatically, you know that because curators is the object of this preposition of, and it's inside the preposition phrase, which we can just ignore. So expertise is going to be third person singular, and that's correct because in this tense is present perfect, has protected, and it implies that this protection has been going on since the past up until the present and ongoing. So choice A works. Choice B. Choice B is also present perfect, but it changes to third person plural, and that doesn't work with the subject expertise, so we're going to eliminate it. Choice C, are protected, also doesn't work because this is present progressive in the plural tense, and that's not the meaning that they want to get across. Choice D, were protecting. This is past progressive, also wrong because were protecting is plural, and also it's not the meaning that they're trying to get across. So present progressive is the best with third person singular, choice A. Question 40, which choice provides the most effective explanation for the action described in the sentence? So what is the action? We'll have to read the sentence. In an effort to beautify Athens, the Greek government constructed a large state-of-the-art museum which opened in 2009 to house the Parthenon sculptures that still remain in the country. So is the explanation for building this museum to make Athens more beautiful? Maybe, maybe not. It's also a little awkwardly phrased. You'd have to say in an effort to make Athens more beautiful. So A, probably not the right answer. B, generate more revenue from tourism. Yeah, nowhere in this whole paragraph are we talking about revenue or tourism, so B, definitely not the answer. C, prove its commitment to the sculpture's well-being. This seems like a good possibility because keep in mind we're talking about protecting the sculptures from the elements, and we're talking about whether they've suffered from pollution by being in Greece or Britain, so we'll keep C for now. Choice D, attract more art enthusiasts to its collection of antiquities. So here, really no mention about art enthusiasts. We're focused really more on the sculptures, so C seems to be the best answer. 41. This museum's facilities would also be capable of housing the sculptures that are currently in Britain should they be returned. So clearly the apostrophe is in the wrong place because the facilities belong to the museum. So you'd have to say museum's facilities and then there'd be no apostrophe here. So A is wrong. Choice B does correctly make that fix. Choice C is missing the possessive after museum, so it's not going to work. Choice D, if you put the apostrophe after the S, it would imply that there are multiple museums, but clearly we're only talking about one, so D is also out. Question 42, which choice most effectively introduces the sentence that follows? Let's read it. Regardless of the controversy, the Parthenon sculptures deserve a wide audience. Some argue that cultural artifacts belong in the country where they were created, while others still say the large international institution like the British Museum is best suited to house objects that are significant to human history. So right now the issue is that the first sentence is taking a pretty strong position that they deserve a wide audience, but it doesn't really specify where or how, while the next sentence is trying to give both sides of the argument. So most likely we'll need a better introductory sentence, one that's a little bit more neutral. So for now we'll say A is not the best choice. Let's read B. The debate over the ultimate fate of the Parthenon sculptures continues to this day. That is very true, and that's what's going on when you read the rest of the paragraph, so we'll keep it. C. Many questions remain about the construction of the Parthenon sculptures. So the construction of the sculptures themselves was never a question or an issue in this whole passage. So we'll cross out choice C. Choice D. The argument about the Parthenon sculptures is one of many arts-related controversies. It could be true that there are other arts-related controversies, but nothing was mentioned about them in the passage, so it's really kind of inappropriate to open this paragraph like that. So we're left with choice B as the best choice. Question 43. Which choice most effectively combines the sentences at the underlined portion? Let's read them starting from here. In 2015, the Greek government decided not to pursue legal action against Britain. It opted instead for continued diplomatic efforts. Choice A. Against Britain instead of opting for continued diplomatic efforts. So choice A changes the meaning. It sounds like they decided not to pursue legal action against Britain instead of diplomatic efforts. So it sounds like they didn't do anything, which is wrong. Choice B. Against Britain instead, the Greek government opted for continued diplomatic efforts. Choice B is very similar to what we have now, which is the two ideas separated by a period. So it's questionable whether using a semicolon instead of a period actually accomplishes anything, so not likely the answer. Choice C, against Britain, which opted instead for continued diplomatic efforts. Here, by using the pronoun which, it sounds like Britain is the one who opted instead for diplomatic efforts, also changing the meaning of the sentence, so that's going to be wrong. D, against Britain, opting instead. So notice what's going on here. We're using a participle. Instead of saying it opted, we're going to say comma, opting instead. And by using participle, it makes it clear that the Greek government is the one who's opting instead for continued diplomatic efforts. So choice D is going to be our best choice. Question 44, let's read the sentence. As of 2018, it remains uncertain where the Parthenon sculptures in the British Museum will ultimately reside. So this is actually an okay sentence minus the question mark. Notice what's going on here. As of 2018, it remains uncertain. This is the main clause of the sentence. This is the independent clause. Everything from where to the end is going to be an adverbial clause describing uncertain, which is an adjective. So the base sentence is it remains uncertain, and the rest of this describes that uncertainty. What is the uncertainty? Where the Parthenon sculptures will ultimately reside. So we know we have to change this question mark, so A is not going to be the answer. Notice choice B does that for us, changes it into a period, so that's right. Notice choices C and D, which is very interesting. If you add the word will right after where, instead of this whole thing acting as an adverbial clause describing the adjective uncertain, now it becomes an independent clause, and now you have two independent clauses. The first independent clause is it remains uncertain. That can be a full sentence. And the second clause is where will the Parthenon sculptures in the museum will ultimately reside. Also kind of doesn't make sense. So that should tell you that it's wrong. But if you have two independent clauses, you need to connect them somehow, which it doesn't do. So choice C and D are out, and B is our best choice.